What if there was a world beyond our own? Another realm or dimension where people were never meant to be? Today you'll hear the story of David Lang, a man who knows all about that other place because he's been there. Welcome to the Void. As the sun shone brightly, David Lang was laboring on his farm when all of a sudden he vanished, disappeared in an instant. Abigail, his wife, and a couple of people on the road passing by couldn't believe their eyes. They all raced into the field where he was working and searched everywhere to find him, thinking maybe he had fallen into a hole. But there was nothing. But they didn't give up. For days, his wife and daughter trudged through the fields, their voices strained with desperation. It was as if David had been swallowed by the earth. Slowly, their efforts dwindled, and the search abandoned, yielding nothing but a lingering sorrow and dreary silence. So time went by, and 3 long years passed since David disappeared, and the family had all but lost hope. But then one day, out of nowhere, Sarah heard a faint whisper in the wind. It sounded like her dad's voice, but it was filled with dread and terror. She yelled for her mom to come quickly, and even she could hear the echoes of her husband's tormented cries. Over the next few days, the strange voice would come and go with increasing urgency. Help me, it would say. Desperate for answers, the family brought in a priest to help make sense of this whole situation. But after being in the field, the holy man declared that they were dealing with a trick of the devil and urged them to abandon their search. The desperate plea for help opened a flurry of activity. Reporters and curious onlookers descended upon the small town, but only one person could provide an answer, a young physicist sent by the local university. After careful examination of the area, he found an electromagnetic field that was off the charts. It was a phenomenon, but he couldn't explain it either. As he ran more tests, a palpable feeling of dread settled over the town. No one wanted to admit the truth, but everyone knew something sinister was at play. The mayor eventually asked the Lang family to stop calling forth the voices, and they reluctantly obliged. Days passed and no one went into the field, and eventually David was almost forgotten, except for when his name was mentioned in a hushed whisper on the wind coming far from the field. It was like a ghost story, something that existed in the mind and yet still had a lingering effect on the community. Then, 20 years later, it all came back and everything changed. David stepped out of the shadows and appeared in the doorway of his old home, and Abigail's heart almost skipped a beat. He was the same age when he had left. His eyes were like piercing daggers, subdued and empty of emotion. No one could believe it. After all these years, David had returned from the depths of oblivion and was now standing before them. Or at least, so it seemed. His presence emitted a tangible dread. Something was terribly wrong. The bustle of people that arrived at the scene the following day was overwhelming. David was bombarded with questions from everyone, from local papers to even the national news. But he said nothing to anyone. Some time passed, and Abigail, his sweet wife, who had seen David vanish so many years ago, grew old and feeble, while David seemed to remain relatively young. Then, on her deathbed, with her last breath, she asked him something that she had been wanting to know her entire life. What happened to him that fateful night? With great sorrow in his eyes, David nodded his head and told his story. He said he had been taken by a group of beings known as the Watchers. They were tall, dark figures with an unimaginable power. They told David he had been chosen to make the ultimate sacrifice, and in return, one day they would give him something. Abigail asked for more information, but David just shook his head and said it was too terrible for him to tell. That night, his beloved wife passed away, and David became even more distant. His children ventured to the farm from time to time, but they could never seem to find their father there, at least the man they used to know. His face remained ageless, and his eyes had a faraway look of terror that left the kids trembling and anxious to run home. Then one day, David Lang disappeared again, this time never to return, leaving a cloud of rumors in his wake. Reports of dark shadows and quiet whispers surrounded the old Lang farm, leaving the townsfolk with an air of unease. Something dark lurked in the shadows of that old homestead, and no one dared try to uncover it. The village feared to speak of those dark and sinister secrets, but they all knew the truth. Tales were whispered in hushed tones of the terrifying shadow creatures that stalked the night, their gaunt frames towering above the gloom, and their eyes always searching and always watching. And so the story of David Lang comes to a close, a reminder of the mysterious forces that exist in this world beyond our understanding. A cautionary tale of the power of the Watchers, who seem to hold the key to life and death. My name is Mark Wahlbeck, and this is The Void. Until next time.